TitleMatchNetwork.com.
I wrote it in my book. I'll say it on this camera in this interview. Vince McMahon gave me the biggest break in my wrestling career. Vince McMahon treated me better than any wrestling promoter has ever treated me or I could ever imagine being treated. And that will forever be true. And I will forever be grateful to the World Wrestling Federation and to Vince McMahon for what he did for me. I will never forget that. But that doesn't keep me from feeling the way I do today about the direction that the business has taken and the direction that Vince has taken the business. It saddens me more than it does anything. And I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but
you can get into it.
You know, the wrestling business today it's not the wrestling business anymore. It is not wrestling anymore. Wrestling has evolved from the time that television started. It was brand new, and you look at those matches and you see the progression of the business, but the basic fundamentals of the business never changed. The wrestling business, in its simplest form, has always been about the battle between good and evil. You always had the good guys and the bad guys. After World War II, your bad guys, you'd have the ethnic thing, the Japanese guys and the German guys. And there was always, or in New York, it was, Pedro Morales, the Puerto Rican,
right.
Bruno Sammartino, the Italian, or Chief J. Strongbow, the Indian, all the ethnic, but the good and the evil was always, it was a morality play. And when people would ask Ted DiBiase, what is it about professional wrestling that draws people to it? What is it about professional wrestling that will fill a building and the people watching know that it's a show? I said, well, what fills a theater? What fills a Broadway show? They know that's a show. What fills, any event like that? What fills a movie theater with people? They know that's not real either. It's, what do you call it? I call it suspended disbelief. It's like you take and you check your mind at the door, or your troubles. You leave reality at the door, and for that 2 hours or that 3 hours, I'm going to be entertained by this, even though I know it's not real. I'm going to put myself into this and enjoy it, and that's pro wrestling. And it's always been that. People in the days of the Depression, wrestling thrived. Wrestlers were making money when nobody else was. And why would people spend their money to go to the wrestling matches when they didn't have enough money to eat most of the time? Or when they, or forget to pay their bills and use that money to go to wrestling matches? Because it made them happy. Because they could vent all of their frustrations at ringside. And they could take out their frustrations on the bad guy and cheer for the good guy. And they could align themselves with that character, and that's what wrestling has always been. And as a bad guy, most of the fans know, most of the fans that really follow wrestling and follow the lives of the guys in the business, they know that today Ted DiBiase is a Christian, that I'm an ordained minister. Folks, I'll tell you what, I said, as I think about it and look back at it sometimes, I'm probably as surprised as anybody that I am where I am today. And that's another story in itself, how I've come to be a minister. I said, but, the thing about wrestling that disappoints me so bad today is that even if I weren't a minister, Owen Hart wasn't a minister, but Owen Hart was a guy that loved his family. Owen Hart was a guy who loved his children and his wife. Owen Hart was a guy who said to Vince McMahon of the World Wrestling Federation, no, I'm not going to be part of an angle that is telling the people at home that I'm having an affair with another woman. Because I don't want to have to try to explain that to my young children when they come home. I don't want to expose my kids to that anymore. That's not what wrestling is about. Wrestling is about the battle between good and evil, between two guys in a ring, between a physical battle, a contest, not a a lovesick soap opera. That's why Owen Hart said no. And as a result of saying no, and as a way of slapping his wrists, the WWF made him the Blue Blazer again, which I remember when Owen Hart came to the WWF, and he hated it then, and they knew that he hated it. And because they knew he hated it, it was like, well, you're not going to do what we want, so we'll show you who's boss. And they made him the Blue Blazer again. And as a result of making him the Blue Blazer, they come up with that idea to drop him out of the ceiling, which is something else he didn't want to do, that he wasn't comfortable doing, that he felt forced to do. And as a result of that, he's dead today. You know, was it done intentionally? Absolutely not. It was an accident. It was a tragic accident. But it's a tragic accident that never should have happened. But back to my point, take the fact that I am a minister of the gospel out of it. Wrestling has always been about good versus evil. It's not today. It is not the same business anymore. Today, wrestling glorifies the anti-hero. Wrestling makes a star and a hero to the children and to the young adults in our country. They make stars out of the thug, out of the street gang member, out of the pimps. Folks, I don't know about you. As much as I've loved this business all of my life, I do not want to expose my children to that. I don't want to, it makes me sick in the heart when people say, weren't you a wrestler? And today I have to qualify what I say by saying yes, but I was a wrestler when it was still wrestling. Because I do not want to align myself with what is being put out there to the public today that's being called professional wrestling. And maybe as you listen to this interview, you're going, golly, Ted, maybe you're being a little bit too harsh. Well, I don't think I am. I really don't think I am, because is wrestling a reflection of our society today? Without a doubt. But my question then is, what's happened to our society, when we are entertained by guys like Howard Stern, who is about as disgusting as they come, and Jerry Springer and tabloid television and even the extremes. I guess are we going to go all the way back to the Gladiators? ECW. ECW. I give ECW for credit for the tenacity they had to rise to the power that they've been able to become. In that marketplace, after the WWF was so big, to be out there and get competitive. Hats off to you. But what are you selling? What are you selling? What are you selling? You're selling hardcore brutality. And what kind of message are you sending to the public and to kids? My heart says somewhere, somebody has got to stop and say, I'm not going to make the bottom line be what's most important. How much money we can make, and whether we're number one or we're number two. But I'm going to do what's right, because we still have kids walking into school and taking out guns and killing kids. And that's not going to stop until a lot of things happen. And I don't want to start preaching on this, because this is not about Ted the minister. This is about Ted the wrestler. But I'm specifically speaking about the wrestling issue today. The wrestling that's being viewed today. My gosh, there would have been a time when I would have been so proud to say, 7 of the top shows on television are pro wrestling. And the 3 number 1 shows, the top 3, 1, 2, and 3, are all wrestling in the cable ratings. I said, I'd have been so proud of that, but I said, I'm not today, because of the content and of what is being was being aired. Yeah, it's a reflection of us as a people, but it's time for us as a people to stop and look at ourselves and say, where do we go from here? I mean, let's go back in history. The first great democracy was the one called Rome, the Roman Empire. And they were great just like we've been great. And they lasted, 700 years? But they ended up feeding people to lions and killing each other in the arenas for entertainment. How far are we going to go? Are we going to learn from history? The thing that I enjoyed about being a wrestler was that even as the bad guy, and I was, the greatest years of my life, I was a villain. But folks, all of you wrestling fans know that I spent most of my career getting beat. That was my job. It was my job to say to the fan, ultimately, through what happened in the ring, you know what? My money can't buy Hulk Hogan. My money can't buy everything. If I keep thinking my money's going to buy everything, ultimately, it's going to blow up in my face. That was the story that the $1 Million Man told. That was the story that Hulk Hogan told when he said, Dibiase, I can't be bought. That's a good story. Yeah, wrestling's violent. Yeah, wrestling is in some ways violence, but violence is a part of life. Violence is, hey, there's plenty of violence in the Bible. But what do the stories tell? What's the moral of the story? You see, the thing that was always so wonderful about wrestling was the moral of the story was that when it came down to the blow-off, when it came down to the pay-per-view match, when it came down to the good guy versus that bad guy, and that good guy who had been beat and robbed and cheated for 10 weeks, when he finally got the conditions of the match right and got that no good so-and-so in the ring for the blow-off match, he was the guy that came out the winner. And that was a story being told to our kids. That's not true today. Today, it's if the bad guy can get away with it, he's cool. And I'm sorry, but that's not the right story. And I just pray, I really do, that one day that'll change. Do I love this business? You bet I do. It has put a roof over my head and food in my mouth most of my life. But as long as I'm alive, I'm going to say what I said today, and I will do everything that I can, to bring that back in some way. And there's a lot of people out there who would like to see that come back.